how do you set your tire pressures absolutely reliably every single time? If you're collecting tire temperature data, is there a way to help you organize that and even to help you interpret that in a more efficient and faster way? After all, this information gives you so much knowledge and so much insight into your performance. Wouldn't it be better just to have access to that information a little bit more quickly? So the Smart Run Sheet is part of the Master Your Tires program. If you're familiar with that already, I hope you liked this little update that I've been working on. There'll be 2 or 3 things here that will be new for you. And if you haven't seen it before, what I'll do is I'll take you through some of the main features of this tool, which is really something that I use every single time I go to the track to try and help manage and get more value from all this tire information, this tire data that I encourage you to be taking. And so hopefully you can see why it's worth it and get yourself a copy with part of the course. So what I'll do here is I'll just dive you through a couple of the different tabs to orientate yourself. It's a spreadsheet, but hopefully you'll see it's a little bit more than that. Then we'll get into an example and sort of say, okay, well, try and put this into context with a real world scenario. So here we're looking at the run sheet. Now, if you've ever recorded any information on your setup or your performance on a run sheet, this will look very familiar to you. It's a pretty standard layout and one that I iterated on for a long time just to sort of get a feel for everything we're doing. So you've got a little area up here to sort of set the context, what day it is and what sort of stuff, what the weather's like, some stuff about the setup, and this is things that I can change on my race car, but you can modify those to whatever you want. And the idea with this is like you've got 4 or 5 different runs that you can compare next to each other. And so you fill in all your setup for the beginning of the day, and then if you change anything at any point, you only record the changes. And the idea of that is it just gives yourself a little bit more visibility of what was actually changing. You don't have to repeat yourself all day. And then with the tires, we're looking at stuff when they're cold and when they're hot. So we want to look at the cold pressures. So what cold pressures should we set? And what hot pressures do we achieve at the end of our run? And then with the tire temperatures, looking at the spread of temperature across the tread of the tire. It's a common practice and one that I use all the time to take 3 samples across each tire. And so this area just highlights it in one little block. And then some more context to that. So what was the lap time? How long was the run? I like to track the peak lateral longitudinal G for each run, just to give me an idea of how my tyres are performing and whether or not we've been able to achieve more grip in each one. Not everyone has onboard data logging, but if you do, it's a way of assessing your grip or keeping a track of your grip. The next block is a bit of a handling one. This is probably a bit over the top for most people, but the idea is we're trying to find the understeer and oversteer balance of the car through different phases of the corner and for different types of corners. So what I've done, I like to look at is a low speed corner, so a hairpin, but then a high speed corner, like a nice big sweeper, because sometimes your car can have a different feel in those 2 different conditions, particularly if it's running an aero setup. And the idea is just to give yourself like on corner entry, how is it feeling, mid corner and on the exit. And just to give yourself a bit of an idea of what the balance is like on your car. And then so as you're sort of changing all these bits and pieces, you can sort of track actually, that made a difference or not. And then below, just a free comments box. We tend to use this for recording some of the other settings that we haven't really put in the rest of the sheet, or just some other comments about the track or the session type or such like. So now that's the run sheet. It's pretty standard. And, I think you'll be familiar with it. Where it comes, and it gets a little bit different, there's a bit of color coding going on. And so I'll get into that in a sec. So that's the run sheet. What cold pressure do you set next time out? Well, I've got this pressure insights tab here. When you get into this, it becomes very familiar. Looking at all these things for the first time will be possibly a bit overwhelming. But the idea here is very simply, you set your ideal hot pressures here. You put those in. And then all the rest of the sheet basically gives you some suggestion of what cold pressures will achieve those hots. Okay. And what it uses is historic data that you've recorded to do that. And I'll go through that a little bit in a minute. And when you have the temperature data, you want to look at interpreting that as well. So I've created these panels here. I've kind of zoomed in a little bit. There's 5 of them across the sheet here. But this is in effect a model of your car. You can sort of see the front of the car and the back of the car, and it's pulling in this information that you're gathering, the pressures and the temperatures, and trying to make sense of them in terms of interpreting that information. Is it good or bad or whatever? And here you can set some ranges. So you've got some ranges for what your tire temperature, what tire temperature you like your tire to be in, the contact contact patch pressure for when it's hot, so what hot pressure do you want? And here I've got a little bit of a difference in temperature based on a gradient of temperature across the trick. So these are kind of common ways of interpreting this information. The difference is we're kind of baking it in and trying to automate some of that. I've also done this little chart in the middle, and that kind of gives you a feeling for, if you're familiar with doing your cross weights, you'll be familiar with this kind of idea of like, well, things are maybe slightly offset to one side or the other. What we're doing here is looking at that from a temperature point of view, so you can kind of compare the two. Actually, in this example, the motor is pretty good, but you can see that this line moves around and it gives you a real steer on how to adjust your settings for more grip. Corner weights is a very simple tab here that just gives you, you put your corner weights in for the car and it just gives you those basic metrics. Here you can see a better example of that little chart. You can see we're slightly back and to the right, basically, is what these corner weights are telling us. And I just kind of like that visual way of looking at it. But we've also got all the data and the numbers anyway that you'd be more familiar with. So this is just sort of lifting up. You just fill in the yellow box. It shows you the stuff that you will already see on your scale, but the idea is we're trying to capture that. What I want to do, one last thing, if you're looking at the units and going, oh, I have different units. So there's a unit selector. In the UK, we have these kind of crazy units they're not metric and they're not imperial, but if you have a different set, you can simply click here and it will change all the units. And there's a whole bunch of calculations that are going on in the background, as you'll see for some of the corrections, and they will adapt as well. So hopefully that makes it simple. So the first thing you really do is set your units and off you go. I'm going to put them back to these crazy, and hopefully that makes sense. And there's a bit of a help guide here for getting you going. That's basically the sheet. A load more to it, which I won't go into right now. I just want to give you another an example of how you would use it. So what's happened so far here is that we've gone out and we've done a first run. So what I like to do, if on a first run at a new track, is I look to set my tyre pressure, my cold tyre pressures, pretty much even all the way around on all 4 tyres, and then see what happens. Okay, so we've got them roughly in the ballpark for where we want to go to, but let's see how this track's playing out, because each tyre will have its own experience around the track, and so they will change in pressure differently. Sorry, the temperature insights. And it comes from these target ranges that we've set. So I'm saying for this tyre, for argument's sake, we want it to be in a 50 to 60 degree centigrade range. The tyre pressures, I want it to be sort of 26, but you can't say 26 because it's got to be plus or minus something. So I've said 26 to 27. I've put on the slightly higher end, and this spread here of a few degrees across the tread. All right. So, and at the moment, and then just looking at this temperature, so you can see actually, well, the temperatures, they're all kind of in the 40s. And so from where I want it in the 50s, it's a bit cool. So hence it's blue. And from the pressures, they're also seen a little bit low. So it's 24, 25, based on, the information that we've used before and some of the testing processes that I go into on the program, on the Master Your Tyres program. These are the kind of numbers that you'll get a lot more confidence in, why 50 to 60 and why 26 to 27, well, they're the kind of numbers that I help you work out. Once you do have those numbers, you can see here, we're a little bit cool, we're a little bit below temperature. So if I go back to here, that's why this is the color is at. So if you did happen to go out next time and you rate 26, let's say 26.5, you can see the okay. And then if we go above 27, which is part of our target, especially P5, for example, it goes too hot. And so that's a nice little feature there. That is a new one for you if you've used this before, but we're jumping between tabs. Hopefully you'll just get more of a snapshot instantly of where you're at for each one. So what I'm going to do is come out a little bit, right? So we're about to go out for our second run of the day. We know we're a little bit low on tyre pressures, so we want to be up on the 26s. Now the question is, what cold pressures do I set on my tyres to make sure that when we come in hot, they're all 26? The common question that you'll have had anytime you've started to look at tyre pressure management and looking at trying to get more grip from your tyres, if I can reliably hit that target pressure, I'm going to have much more fun and I'm going to get much more grip and better lap time. But what is the cold pressure that will give you that figure? So what we do is use that initial run in this scale factor method. So you use one run. As you build up through the day, you can use multiple runs to try and help you work out what these figures will be. But ultimately, what this is saying is, this is a sort of manual bit and an automated bit. So I'm just going to look at this one here. And what this is saying here is that to achieve 26 PSI all round, we need to set our tyre pressures to these ones here, to these figures here, to the decimal point. And so that's basically all you need to do. And that's quite a simple thing to achieve, and you just set those and off you go. But one of the things you may have noticed here is the weather conditions are different to the morning session. And this is something you may have experienced all the time. The first run of the day is quite cold or overcast, and then later in the afternoon, the sun comes out and the temperature increases. So how can you use that information in the morning and still hit the pressures you want to hit? So I explained on the program, but using gas laws and such like that, look at how the gas inside your tire changes with temperature. And so what we're doing here is we're going to use this information. We can kind of create a little correction to those starting figures. So we've got a track temperature now. So it was 21, now it's 26. And air temperature of 18, and it's now 23. Okay, so what we're going to go in and do here is, if I put in 23 and track 26, okay, this has now automatically gone away, done a whole load of maths, and corrected the cold pressure recommendations because the weather has changed in effect. And if I just sort of delete those, if you keep an eye on this area, just to sort of might have changed before you realise. Can you see these ones here? And then if I put them back in again, these figures are changed. Okay, so now these are the figures that I'm going to set for my car for the next session, which is great. So I can get my trusty pressure gauge out and set those. So what I've also added here, for anyone who uses a race sense pressure gauge, which is one of the ones I've been using recently, I've added this sort of auto import function here. So the race sense gauge just kind of, it records it on the unit and it makes it a lot easier. So, rather than scribbling down a piece of paper, it sort of stored it in memory. And you can download that to a CSV and then import that CSV here using this button, which I've already done. And it imports it into a little table like this with loads of information, more than we probably need, but it's some interesting stuff for you. And so what I'm going to do here is so we've already got everything in run 1. So I'm going to copy in data from run 2 as if we've just done that session now. Okay, so if I copy it in, and it has a little pop-up box that comes up here. Okay, and you've got cold pressures and hot pressures, or cold data and hot data, which is both the same thing. But anyway, and so we've already got like run 1 in here. So we've gone out and so that's the cold information for run 2 and the hot information for run 2, and you literally just click import, and rather than having to type it all in manually, it just pulls it all in. Don't know what to do. Like set, right, yeah, it was dry, the same. And you can see, right, so what were the figures? If we go back to here, so it was recommending these figures, and these were what I actually set, which are pretty close. I think I got this one slightly wrong in practice, such as my fumbling with the tire gauge. And then you can see the outcome. You can see, well, actually, we are on the 26s now, but maybe we could probably do a little bit better. I like to get within half a PSI. And this one particularly, I would say we could do with a bit more refinements. I would be looking to refine that a bit more. And there's lots of things that impact the growth. It's not just a pure like engineering and gas law kind of offset. If the driver drives differently and they have a different kind of session, these things will adapt as well. But over time, it's nice to get these more and more refined. So we go back to the run sheet and you can kind of see, so the pressures come up where we want them. And now temperatures have come up as well, which you'd probably expect. Well, there's 2 of them which are okay, and then there's this one here which is possibly a little bit hot. So we dive into the temperature insights tag. So here we have the original run, which is kind of a lot of blue, and then this new run here, which still has quite an even distribution of temperatures across the each straight, which is something I'm looking to spot. And really that is calibrated quite nicely. We can cross-rate quite often. And then here we're looking at, okay, well, these are sort of a little bit hot. So that rear right is a little bit hot, and that front left is the rear left is a bit hot, and the front right's a bit hot. So these are giving you some direction now. They're kind of saying, okay, so these are presenting you with a problem, in inverted commas, to say, right, how can I maybe rebalance these temperatures using some setup adjustments? And again, I'm not going to go into that now, but that's the kind of stuff that we look at a little bit in the program. And, just trying to think, well, okay, if I made some changes, I'm expecting to see differences here in these temperatures. And it really does give you that guide. The other thing it does, which is nice, is it takes the 3 temperatures, but it also creates this little spark line here for each of the tires. So it kind of gives you a sort of a gradient across. And what it's kind of saying to me is that whilst we're at our 26 PSI, sort of saying, it's a bit pointy in the middle, that we're maybe slightly overinflated. In this case, I wouldn't necessarily be panicking too much, but that's kind of what it's saying, rather than having a nice straight line. The big thing that it's saying to me, though, is that not a massive amount of camber on this tire, and so possibly we could add a little bit more camber to try and get a bit more work at the inside of the tire, working a bit harder, and then see how we go again. So in this case, I'll be thinking, right, okay, I'll add a bit more camber on there, be interested to see how this profile changes, and maybe whether we can make a small pressure change as well to sort of maybe bring that one up and then maybe bring this one down, and just to sort of rebalance everything so that next time we come out, we have a bit more camber being used on the inside of the tire, and maybe a more accurate pressure distribution for the front and the rear. And again, on this one, it's just showing that we've got some good camber. That's kind of a nice shape here, but it's a little bit, maybe a little bit hot. So we're just sort of wondering, okay, well, maybe there's something we can do here to reduce that temperature. And you've got lots of options for doing that. And then this one's quite nice. Again, maybe a little bit more camber if we can add that, if possible, but this is pretty good at the back here. So anyway, that gives you a bit of a flavor for the updates for the tool. You can see it's a little bit more colorful. There's a lot more information being presented to you, hopefully in an easier way. I've recently used this in the field again, and it was much more useful for me and much quicker to get that information and to make those decisions, when you're pressed for time between tight sessions. And if you do happen to use a race sense gauge, you've got this option to import. If you CSV file into this area, as long as it's in the right columns or whatever, you can import that as well. I'm really just trying to make this as user-friendly as possible so you can get as automated an experience as you can. Okay, well, that's it for this update for the sheet. I'm really excited to hear how you get on with it and hear how you adapt it, make it your own. And look, wishing you the best of luck. Please sign up to Master Your Tires so you can get a copy of this for yourself. Okay, bye now.